What if I told you that the voice in your head isn't entirely yours? That your brain rewrites your memories every time you recall them? That your perception of now is already the past? And what you call free will might just be biological theatre? These aren't theories. These are unsettling facts verified by neuroscience, psychology, and quantum physics. Over the next hour, we'll explore the cracks in your perception, the blind spots in your consciousness, and the strange truths your mind was designed to overlook. So if you're ready to question your thoughts, doubt your choices, and feel reality itself bend beneath your feet, let's step into the hidden architecture of the self, where nothing is quite what it seems. Imagine walking into a room where two doors stand side by side. Simple, solid, unmoving. You take a step toward one, expecting a predictable outcome. But just as you reach for the handle, both doors flicker, blend, shimmer, as if the choice to look has changed not only what you see, but what exists. This isn't a dream or a philosophical thought experiment. It's the foundation of one of the most famous and unsettling discoveries in quantum physics, the double-slit experiment. When you're not observing an electron's path, it doesn't act like a particle. It acts like a wave, interfering with itself as if it passed through both slits at once. The result is an interference pattern on the screen, dark and light bands like ripples from two stones tossed into a pond. But here's where it gets eerie. The moment you add a detector to see which slit it went through, the pattern changes. The electron now behaves like a particle. It chooses one slit, the interference disappears, the wave collapses, and the only thing that changed was your decision to observe. It's as if the particle was undecided about what it wanted to be until you asked, as if the question itself defined the answer. And this defies everything you've ever been taught about how the world works. The double-slit experiment reveals that particles exist in a superposition, multiple states at once until observation collapses them into a single state. They are waves of probability smeared across outcomes, like a future not yet chosen. You live in delay. Imagine watching a live broadcast with a tiny, unnoticeable lag. The game's already been played, but you're still cheering, reacting, thinking it's unfolding in real time. Now imagine that this isn't just your TV, but your life. Every moment you see, every movement you track, every face you look into, it's already happened. You're always a few milliseconds behind reality. Light from an object enters your eyes and hits your retina. That information is converted into electrical signals and sent to your brain. Your brain then processes those signals, adds context, fills in gaps, and finally delivers a finished picture to your conscious awareness. The entire process takes about 80 milliseconds. That doesn't sound like much, less than a blink, but in a world that moves as fast as ours, it's significant. By the time you react to something visually, that thing's already gone. You're not seeing the punch, you're seeing where it was. You're not watching the bird fly, you're watching its ghost trail. Even when you speak, your brain started preparing the words before you were aware of the impulse. You're always just slightly behind the steering wheel of your own life. Imagine trying to operate the world's most complex supercomputer blindfolded with no manual and only the soft hum of its fans to hint that it's even on. That's your life, because the brain you live with is not only vastly more powerful than anything humans have ever built, it's also largely hidden from you. You think you're the driver of your thoughts, the originator of your choices, the captain of your consciousness, but in truth, you're more like a passenger in a ship that's already halfway to its destination by the time you realize you're even on board. Most of what your brain does, it does without your permission, without your awareness, and without leaving a trace. From interpreting billions of bits of sensory data every second, to coordinating complex muscular actions, to shaping your emotional responses, and even scripting the illusion of your free will. The unconscious mind is the architect behind the curtain. The conscious self, the one that thinks it's in control, is more like a narrator trying to keep up with a story that's already been written. You've never actually seen the world, not directly, not as it is. What you see is a version of the world, processed, filtered, translated, like a painting of a landscape you've never visited, drawn by a mind trying its best to guess what's out there. Every sound you hear, every colour you see, every texture you feel isn't the world itself, but your brain's interpretation of electrical signals triggered by contact with it. You don't perceive reality, you perceive a rendering of it. A reconstruction, a simulation built from fragments stitched together so seamlessly that it fools you into thinking it's real. But just like a map is not the terrain, and a photo is not the person, your experience of the world is not the world. It's a best guess, a user interface designed not for truth, but for survival. Let's begin with something as basic as colour. You look at a strawberry and call it red. But red doesn't exist in the strawberry. There are no colours in the external world, only electromagnetic waves of different frequencies. The object reflects certain wavelengths. Your eyes absorb them, and your brain assigns a label. Red. But red isn't out there. It's in here, in your mind. The world doesn't have colour. You do. Think of your memory like a soft wax tablet rather than a locked vault. Each time you press into it, each time you revisit a moment, it reshapes. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but subtly, quietly. A small edge blurs, a detail shifts, a sound that never happened is suddenly there. A glance becomes a stare. A neutral phrase takes on a tone. You don't notice the change because the new version feels just as real, sometimes more so. But it's no longer the memory you once had. Every recollection is a rewrite, not a replay. Your mind is not retrieving a file. It's repainting a scene, and with each stroke it introduces variations that blend with what you believe is truth. Memories are reconstructions, not recordings. When you remember something, your brain doesn't retrieve a perfect image. It rebuilds the experience from fragments, bits of sight, sound, emotion, and context, and assembles them into a coherent story. It uses clues from the present to fill in the gaps from the past. And in doing so, it often alters the original. The more emotionally charged a memory is, the more it gets rehearsed. And paradoxically, the more it becomes vulnerable to distortion. Your most vivid memories, the ones you're sure are accurate, may be the most revised. Your brain can't tell the difference between reality and imagination. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a flame. Not a real one, just an image in your mind. Yet your body responds. Your pupils adjust. Your skin might even register the imagined warmth. The line between what you envision and what you perceive begins to blur. And this blur is not symbolic, it's neurological. Your brain in all its complexity lights up in nearly the same patterns, whether you're experiencing something firsthand or simply imagining it. This isn't a poetic exaggeration, it's a measurable truth. Functional MRI scans show that visualizing an object, movement, or memory activates the same brain regions as physically interacting with them. The same neural circuits fire. The same chemistry floods your bloodstream. To your brain, imagination isn't pretend. It's rehearsal. It's reality without the outside world. And once you understand this, everything changes. You begin to question not just the nature of memory and fantasy, but the nature of reality itself. It helps to think of the brain not as a camera, but as a theatre where every sensation is a performance staged by internal systems, using props from memory, prediction, emotion, and expectation. You don't simply receive reality, you interpret it, construct it, filter it. You sit not in the audience of your senses, but in the projection booth. Light enters your eyes, sound enters your ears, but before anything reaches you, it is processed, edited, narrated. All of it happens faster than thought, and sometimes without any external input at all, the brain writes its own scene, a memory, a dream, a fear, and treats it as if it were real. It sends signals to your nervous system, releases hormones, changes your heartbeat, and it doesn't apologize afterward. Because to the brain, activation is truth. If the circuits fire, the experience is real. This is why a nightmare can leave you sweating, why a memory can bring tears, why imagining success can raise your confidence, and imagining rejection can cause actual physical pain. The boundary between what happens outside and what happens inside is paper thin. This idea isn't just fascinating, it's foundational. It explains why trauma leaves scars that aren't visible, why placebo treatments often produce real healing, why anticipating pain can be as agonizing as pain itself. When you rehearse an experience vividly enough, your brain doesn't label it as practice. It processes it like it would a live event, and it wires itself accordingly. This is how neuroplasticity works. Your brain reshapes based on input, regardless of whether that input comes from reality or imagination. The phrase "thoughts become things" is not mystical, it's anatomical, but this adaptive feature comes with a cost. Because just as your brain can use imagination to prepare you, protect you, empower you, it can also trap you. It can replay insults until they scar. It can fabricate dangers that leave you frozen. It can simulate worst-case scenarios so vividly that your body collapses under the weight of situations that never even happened. Anxiety in its deepest form is the brain simulating threats in a loop so convincingly that your body lives them as if they're real. And this leads to exhaustion, burnout, and sometimes despair. You're not weak for feeling this. You're not broken. You're just neurologically loyal to what your imagination keeps rehearsing. Your body is responding to a theatre it thinks is real life. Yet this knowledge also opens a door, because if your brain treats imagination like reality, then you can use that. You can visualize not just fear, but courage, not just despair, but healing, not just defeat, but rising again. Athletes do this. Therapists use this. Meditation relies on this. You don't need external proof to begin. You need focus, repetition, intention. The images you feed your brain shape its wiring. The stories you tell yourself become the language your cells speak. So the next time your mind spirals into what-if scenarios, or replays painful scenes, or whispers failure before you begin, remember your brain isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to simulate survival. It just doesn't always know what to prioritize. That's your role. You get to direct the scene. You get to choose which simulations deserve the spotlight. And while you may never silence your imagination, you can steer it gently, intentionally, toward a version of reality that empowers instead of paralyzes. Everything you perceive is a reconstruction, not the real world. You've never actually seen the world, not directly, not as it is. What you see is a version of the world, processed, filtered, translated, like a painting of a landscape you've never visited, drawn by a mind trying its best to guess what's out there. Every sound you hear, every color you see, every texture you feel isn't the world itself, but your brain's interpretation of electrical signals triggered by contact with it. You don't perceive reality, you perceive a rendering of it, a reconstruction, a simulation built from fragments stitched together so seamlessly that it fools you into thinking it's real. But just like a map is not the terrain and a photo is not the person, your experience of the world is not the world. It's a best guess, a user interface designed not for truth, but for survival. Let's begin with something as basic as color. You look at a strawberry and call it red. But red doesn't exist in the strawberry. There are no colors in the external world, only electromagnetic waves of different frequencies. The object reflects certain wavelengths. Your eyes absorb them and your brain assigns a label. Red. But red isn't out there. It's in here, in your mind. The world doesn't have color. You do. The deception goes deeper because your brain doesn't just process input. It fills in gaps constantly. The world moves too fast and your senses are too limited to catch everything. So your brain cheats. It smooths over the blind spots in your vision. It guesses what should be behind your blinking. It invents continuity where there is none. And you don't notice because the illusion is designed to be invisible. Your brain is editing the film as you watch, cutting and pasting scenes before you're even aware of them. And the editing isn't neutral. It's biased, tilted by memory, emotion, expectation, context. Two people can witness the same event and walk away with entirely different realities. Not because one is lying, but because their brains built different stories and each one feels true. This has evolutionary roots. Early humans didn't need to perceive objective truth. They needed to detect food, predators, shelter, social cues. So evolution shaped our senses not for accuracy, but for efficiency, for survival. What you see is not the real world. It's the interface, like icons on a computer screen. That's your experience of reality. Not the data, the metaphor. Once you realize that your perception is a construction, not a reflection, a strange kind of freedom opens up. Because if your experience is malleable, so is your relationship to it. You can't change reality, but you can change how you reconstruct it. You can train your attention, alter your interpretation, influence the story your brain tells. You are not doomed to a fixed perspective. You are a storyteller with editing rights. What you see has already happened. You live in delay. Imagine watching a live broadcast with a tiny, unnoticeable lag. The game's already been played, but you're still cheering, reacting, thinking it's unfolding in real time. Now imagine that this isn't just your TV, but your life. Every moment you see, every movement you track, every face you look into, it's already happened. You're always a few milliseconds behind reality. The world you perceive has already moved forward by the time your brain finishes constructing the image. You're chasing the present, but never quite catching it. Light from an object enters your eyes and hits your retina. That information is converted into electrical signals and sent to your brain. Your brain then processes those signals, adds context, fills in gaps, and finally delivers a finished picture to your conscious awareness. The entire process takes about 80 milliseconds. That doesn't sound like much, less than a blink. But in a world that moves as fast as ours, it's significant. By the time you react to something visually, that thing is already gone. You're not seeing the punch, you're seeing where it was. You're not watching the bird fly, you're watching its ghost trail. This delay isn't a glitch, it's a feature, a safety buffer. Your brain isn't built for speed, it's built for meaning, for comprehension. And comprehension takes time. Rather than showing you a raw, messy stream of input, your brain prefers to curate. It prioritizes coherence over accuracy. It smooths the moment. It makes things make sense, even if that means lying about when they happened. You think you're reacting in real time. You think your decisions are instantaneous, but every moment you live is already a memory by the time it registers. You're the narrator of a story being told on a slight delay, and the more you look for the seam, the more you begin to sense it in déjà vu, in slow-motion fear, in the eerie gap between thought and action. Even emotions live in delay. When you feel sudden fear, the response is triggered before you understand why. A noise, a movement, a shadow. Your body jolts, your heart races, and only later does your mind construct a reason. That looked like a snake. But by then, the reaction has already come and gone. The cause is retrofitted. The fear arrived first and the explanation was fabricated to make it feel like a choice. This understanding can lead to anxiety or liberation. If you expect your reactions to always be perfect, instantaneous, fully in tune with the moment, you'll be frustrated. But if you accept the delay, you gain clarity. You give yourself space. You stop expecting yourself to be flawless in the moment and instead become aware of the lag. That awareness lets you pause, recalibrate, make room for a second look, a second thought, a second chance. Because the first reaction is always a step behind, but the second can be a step ahead. The universe has no center, yet expands everywhere. You've always pictured the universe like something familiar. A balloon inflating, a sphere growing larger in every direction, a cosmic explosion with a beginning point radiating outward. That's the metaphor they gave you in school. A bang, a centre, a ripple, and yet the truth is far stranger and far less intuitive. The universe has no centre, no middle, no edge, and yet it is expanding everywhere all at once. Like a magic trick in slow motion, space itself stretches between every galaxy, not from one origin point, but equally, silently, relentlessly. And this isn't philosophical poetry, it's measurable, observable, and disturbingly real. But how do you wrap your mind around something expanding without a centre? To understand it, you need to abandon flat earth intuition and embrace something more like a living metaphor. Imagine not a balloon inflating from the outside, but the dough in a rising loaf of bread. The raisins inside, galaxies, don't fly away from a core. They grow distant from each other as the dough stretches uniformly. Each raisin sees every other one move away, and each has no reason to believe it isn't the centre of the loaf. This is our universe, and we are one of those raisins, mistaking perspective for position. You might ask, if it's expanding, what is it expanding into? But that question itself is broken. The universe isn't expanding into space, it's creating space. It's not moving through a pre-existing void. The void is being born between the stars. Every metre between galaxies stretches into 2 metres, then 4, then more. And yet from your position inside, you can't see space being made. You only see light travelling longer paths. You see galaxies redshifted, meaning their light waves are stretched, softened, like a siren moving away. This redshift is how we know the expansion is real. But what we didn't expect, and what still disturbs physicists today, is that the expansion is accelerating. Galaxies aren't just drifting. They're fleeing faster and faster, as though pushed by some invisible pressure. We named this dark energy, not because we understand it, but because we don't. And it's this dark energy that ensures there is no universal centre. The universe doesn't expand from a single explosion point. It expands from within itself. Every point is equally the origin. Every point is equally nowhere. That's the paradox. And it breaks the human mind because the human mind wants structure. It wants hierarchies, it wants beginnings and middles and ends. But the cosmos has no obligation to fit inside our categories. The Big Bang wasn't an explosion in space, it was an explosion of space. Time and matter didn't erupt into a room. They were the room being built. The bang was not loud. It was not visible. It was a quiet shift in the laws of reality. And everything that followed, the stars, the galaxies, you are artifacts of that original stretch. But because it happened everywhere at once, there is no place we can point to and say it started here. The start was not spatial, it was structural. And so we float inside a cosmos that has no centre, but behaves as if every part is the centre. The expansion makes every observer feel at rest, while every other observer seems to be moving away. That's the magic of relativity, and it's unsettling because it means we have no privileged position in the universe. Not physically, and maybe not existentially. Think of it like this. You are on a train in the dark, and there are windows all around. Outside those windows, you see distant lights, other trains, other passengers. Every light appears to drift away, but you cannot tell if you're moving or they are. In truth, space itself is stretching between you. It is not a vehicle, it is the track, and it moves beneath your feet whether you want it to or not. In this metaphor, there is no station, no origin point, just movement. That's what the universe is doing, and it leads to eerie consequences. One day, if the expansion continues, distant galaxies will fade out of view. Their lights will never reach us. We will be alone in a cold, quiet patch of the cosmos, cut off by the very fabric that once connected us. The expansion that creates also isolates. The more the universe grows, the more it forgets itself. But there's a deeper implication here, one that hits at identity. If every point is equally the centre, then the idea of a center loses meaning. And yet, humans crave a center. We want Earth to be the middle. We want ourselves to be the middle, the center of attention, the center of purpose. But the universe laughs gently at that desire. It has no middle because it doesn't need one. It's like a song that echoes in all directions at once, like a painting where every brushstroke begins anew. And maybe that's the hidden beauty. You are not at the center of the universe, but neither is anyone else, which means paradoxically that you're as central as anything can be, because wherever you are, the expansion surrounds you. The Big Bang still echoes in your bones, and you are inside the unfolding, not apart from it. And this is where the metaphor turns inward. Picture your life not as a journey from point A to point B, but as an expansion. Your thoughts stretch, your relationships stretch, your understanding stretches, not from a center, but in every direction. And just like the universe, you expand without knowing what you're expanding into. You create space inside yourself for pain, for joy, for contradiction. And perhaps, just perhaps, the lesson of a centerless universe is that meaning is not fixed, it's generated. Like space, it's something that grows between things, not above them. So next time you look at the stars, don't ask where the center is. There is no center. There is only now. There is only the unfolding, and you, quiet, wondering, breathing, are part of the stretch. Most of the brain's processing is unconscious. Imagine trying to operate the world's most complex supercomputer, blindfolded with no manual and only the soft hum of its fans to hint that it's even on. That's your life. Because the brain you live with, the brain you think you understand, is not only vastly more powerful than anything humans have ever built, it's also largely hidden from you. You think you are the driver of your thoughts, the originator of your choices, the captain of your consciousness. But in truth, you're more like a passenger in a ship that's already halfway to its destination by the time you realize you're even on board. Most of what your brain does, it does without your permission, without your awareness, and without leaving a trace. From interpreting billions of bits of sensory data every second, to coordinating complex muscular actions, to shaping your emotional responses, and even scripting the illusion of your free will. The unconscious mind is the architect behind the curtain, and the conscious self, the one that thinks it's in control, is more like a narrator trying to keep up with a story that's already been written. You don't decide what to feel. You notice what you're feeling. You don't choose your thoughts. You discover them like echoes from a deeper chamber. And by the time those echoes reach your awareness, they've already shaped what you're going to do next. The metaphor is simple. Imagine a theatre. On stage is the conscious mind, the actor, the voice, the script. But beneath the stage is a labyrinth of machinery. Pulleys, levers, spotlights, audio cues, all working in harmony to create the illusion of a seamless performance. That's your unconscious brain. It moves the props, it changes the lighting, it builds the scene before you ever step into it. And just like in a real theatre, the audience only sees what the director wants them to see. They don't know there's a crew of 100 sweating backstage to make the illusion flawless. In your case, that backstage crew is your subconscious processing, and it's doing far more than you think. Take vision, for example. You might believe you open your eyes and see the world directly, but vision is not a passive experience. It's an active construction. Light hits your retina. Yes, but what you see is a stitched-together approximation, built by inference, filled in by prediction, and shaped by memory. Your brain guesses what's out there and shows you a cleaned-up version it thinks will be useful. You never see raw reality, only the tailored version your unconscious mind builds on your behalf. And this invisible processing isn't limited to sight. It's in your hearing, where your brain fills in missing sounds. It's in your memory, which isn't a replay, but a reconstruction. It's in your emotions, which emerge from ancient unconscious circuits long before your rational mind can explain them. The feeling of fear, for instance, can rise in your body before you ever know what you're afraid of. Your pulse quickens, your stomach tightens, And only then does your conscious mind invent a reason, like a news anchor reading headlines after the event already happened. You are always a few seconds behind, and those seconds are everything. They're the gap between stimulus and response, between trigger and behavior, between life and the story you tell yourself about life. Even your decisions, the things you swear you choose, often arise unconsciously. In famous neuroscience experiments, researchers have been able to predict which button a person will press, left or right, several seconds before the person reports making the decision. The brain shows activity in the motor cortex before the subject becomes aware of wanting to move. What does that mean? It suggests that your choice was already on its way, already brewing in the dark long before you claimed it. And this discovery doesn't just shake our confidence in free will. It reshapes our entire sense of identity. If we are not the ones steering, then who are we? Are we observers, commentators, or just the tip of an iceberg floating on a sea of hidden mechanisms? Let's go deeper. Your brain is constantly absorbing patterns of language, of social dynamics, of environmental cues, and adjusting your behavior accordingly without you ever knowing. You walk into a room and instantly feel tension. You meet someone new and feel drawn to them or repelled with no idea why. You get a gut feeling not to trust someone. You avoid a street corner without knowing it's because a shadow reminded you of something traumatic. These are not divine signals. They are computations. Your brain calculates risks, predicts outcomes, matches current input against past data, and prepares your body to act. All while you believe you're just going with your instincts. But instinct is not magic. It's math. It's biology. It's a billion neurons whispering to each other in silence, crafting the world you think you see. Now ask yourself, what else is your brain doing without your permission? It controls your heartbeat. It regulates your breathing. It adjusts your pupil dilation based on emotional state. It activates the immune system in response to stress. It files memories while you sleep. It prunes connections you no longer need. It creates the sense of you, a coherent narrative self, out of fragments, habits, and scattered neural activity. And it defends that narrative fiercely, even when it isn't true. The unconscious mind doesn't just manage background tasks. It shapes your reality. It decides what's important. It hides contradictions. It smooths over the chaos. It lies to keep the illusion alive. But it does this not out of malice. It does this to help you survive. Because consciousness is expensive. It's slow. It's resource intensive. The brain only uses it when absolutely necessary, like a flashlight in the dark. Most of the time, it operates in the shadows. Think about how much you do on autopilot. Driving, walking, typing, scrolling, even talking. Once learned, behaviors get delegated to unconscious circuits. That's efficiency. That's evolution. But it means that your waking life is often lived by a part of you don't even know. And that part of you, that vast, silent, invisible intelligence, is in charge. It always has been. So what should you do with this knowledge? Panic, deny it, or embrace it as a humbling reminder that you are more than what you think, that you are not just the voice in your head, but the machinery beneath it, that the real you is not a single spotlight, but the entire stage. Your unconscious mind is not your enemy. It is your foundation, your protector, your builder. It may be hidden, but it is not lost. And if you learn to listen to its whispers, to your instincts, your dreams, your body, you may find that understanding doesn't always come from thinking harder. Sometimes it comes from quieting the noise and letting the deeper processes speak. Because beneath the words, beneath the logic, beneath the polished thoughts you present to the world, there is a vast unconscious ocean. And you, the conscious mind, are just the ripple on the surface. You are not separate from that ocean. You are its echo. Your thoughts can be influenced just by your posture. Think of your body as a tuning fork. Every movement, every gesture, every position, a subtle vibration that echoes into the vast hallways of your mind. We like to believe our thoughts live in the sealed chamber of the brain, untouched by posture or poise, insulated from the angle of our spine or the position of our chin. But this belief is not only false, it blinds us to one of the most intimate truths about being human, that your body is not separate from your thoughts. It is the theatre in which they unfold. The way you sit, stand, slump, or stretch isn't just a physical habit. It's a signal, a silent language the body speaks to the brain. And the brain, listening carefully, responds not with words, but with feeling, expectation, mood, and belief. A lowered gaze can dim your optimism. A hunched spine can amplify your sense of defeat. A puffed-out chest can invite confidence, like a well-rehearsed lie that becomes the truth. Posture is not passive, it is persuasive. You can think of it like an orchestra conductor. Posture is the conductor's baton waving above your nervous system, setting the rhythm, calling forth emotion and tempo. When you collapse your shoulders and cave in your chest, you're not just compressing your lungs. You're whispering to your brain, we are small, we are losing. And the brain, always eager to serve its master, starts dimming the lights, less dopamine, less serotonin, less spark. You feel sad, not because the world has changed, but because your body has shifted into the shape of sadness. The feedback loop is seamless. Your physiology speaks, your psychology listens, and then answers back, forming a circle that can spiral upward or downward, depending on what you embody. This isn't metaphor, it's measurable. In countless psychological studies, participants who adopted power poses, open, expansive, upright positions, reported feeling more confident and performed better on tasks involving risk-taking and assertiveness. Conversely, those who slouched or folded inward felt more anxious, avoided challenge, and exhibited lower self-esteem. Even hormone levels followed the curve of the spine, testosterone rising with confident posture, cortisol swelling in states of physical withdrawal. Your body chemistry is not fixed. It dances to the tune your posture hums. And this means that thoughts aren't born solely from cognition. They emerge from position. Let's imagine a bridge, a narrow wooden one, stretching across a deep ravine. You approach it with your shoulders back, head high, feet firm. Your brain reads your stance. I am ready. I am capable. So it delivers courage, sharpens your vision, steadies your breath. But now imagine approaching that same bridge, hunched, eyes low, toes pointed inward. Your brain trusting the only data it has. Your posture responds with fear, caution, retreat. Nothing on the bridge has changed. Only you, only your shape, only your silent language. And posture doesn't just influence emotion. It changes perception. People asked to sit upright while evaluating themselves report higher self-respect than those asked to slouch. Children who stand tall while learning show improved memory retention. Elderly patients who begin physical therapy not only move better, they think more clearly. Posture shapes thought like the banks of a river shape its flow. You may believe you're choosing your mindset, but often you're simply adopting the mental weather created by the sky of your body. And here's the strange part. It's not just about grand gestures. Even the smallest muscular shifts matter. The angle of your neck while texting can increase strain and subtly elevate stress. The way you hold your hands in your lap can affect how passive or engaged your mind feels. The tilt of your pelvis while sitting can invite either sluggishness or alertness. We are sensitive machines, exquisite instruments of alignment and feedback, but we walk through life like violins that don't know we're playing music. This becomes more than academic when you realize how posture and trauma interact. People who have experienced chronic stress, anxiety, or emotional pain often adopt protective body language. Crossed arms, curled shoulders, tightened jaws. Over time, these positions become habitual, like armor you forget you're wearing. But this armor doesn't just protect, it isolates. It changes how others perceive you. More importantly, it changes how you perceive the world. A guarded stance signals threat. A lowered chin implies submission. Averted eyes reduce confidence. Your body stuck in old defense patterns keeps your mind trapped in the past, reinforcing the very fears you want to escape. But there's hope in this cycle too, because if the body can trap the mind, it can also liberate it. Deliberately shifting your posture, even when it feels unnatural, sends a new signal. It says, we're safe now, we can open up. The mind, ever trusting of its physical host, responds. It rewires, it rebalances, it lets go. This is why practices like yoga, tai chi, or even simple breath work are so powerful. They teach the body to move in a way that tells a different story, not of fear, not of contraction, but of openness, fluidity, and strength. The body reclaims its voice and the mind listens in awe. In this way, posture is not just about spinal health or etiquette, it's about identity. When you walk tall, you don't just look different, you are different. When you slump, you don't just seem tired, your brain begins to feel tired. Your posture becomes a prophecy. And just like all self-fulfilling prophecies, it can be rewritten. You are not locked into the pose life gave you. You can choose your stance. You can lift your chin, not in arrogance, but in defiance of invisibility. You can uncross your arms not to be vulnerable, but to make room for connection. You can lean forward not to chase something, but to meet the moment halfway. These gestures, small, physical, silent, are the poetry of embodiment. So next time you feel trapped in a spiral of anxious thought, don't just reach for affirmations, reach for your spine. Next time self-doubt clouds your judgment, don't just argue with it. Stand up. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Let your breath open your chest. Look outward. Stretch upward. The message is simple, ancient, and profound. Change your posture, and you change your path, because thought does not exist in a vacuum. It lives in your muscles, in your jawline, in the space between your ribs. Your ideas, your moods, your confidence, all of them rise from the throne of your posture. And when you begin to treat your body not as a passenger, but as a guide, when you listen to its shape, its slope, its stillness, you may discover that clarity, courage, and even joy were never out of reach. They were simply out of alignment. Time doesn't just flow. It stretches and contracts like a living thing. Picture yourself in a waiting room where minutes crawl by like hours. Then imagine losing yourself in conversation where hours vanish like seconds. This isn't just perception. Time itself bends under the weight of speed and gravity. Einstein showed us that the faster you move, the slower time passes for you. Astronauts on the International Space Station age microseconds less than people on Earth. GPS satellites must constantly adjust their clocks because time runs differently at their altitude. You're not just moving through time. Time is moving differently through you, shaped by every step you take and every heartbeat that passes. Your brain is a time traveler, constantly predicting the future and editing the past. When a baseball pitcher throws a fastball, the batter's brain doesn't react to where the ball is. It predicts where the ball will be. Your nervous system is always running simulations, forecasting what should happen next and preparing your body before your conscious mind even notices. This predictive machinery is so sophisticated that you live in a bubble of anticipated reality, experiencing a world your brain expects rather than the raw chaos of what actually unfolds. Every decision you think you make consciously was already brewing in your neural networks, hundreds of milliseconds before you became aware of it. Most of what your brain does happens in complete darkness, hidden from your awareness. Imagine the most complex supercomputer ever built, processing billions of calculations every second, and you're only allowed to see the final results on a tiny screen. That's your relationship with your own mind. Your brain coordinates breathing, digestion, immune responses, emotional reactions, and memory formation without ever consulting the conscious you. It fills in blind spots in your vision, smooths over gaps in your perception, and constructs a seamless narrative of selfhood from scattered neural fragments. The voice in your head that you call you is more like a narrator trying to keep up with a story that's already been written by deeper, unconscious processes. Your memories are not recordings, they're reconstructions that change every time you access them. Think of memory like a song that gets slightly rewritten each time it's performed. Every time you recall a childhood birthday party or your first kiss, your brain rebuilds the experience from fragments, influenced by your current mood, beliefs, and expectations. Details shift, emotions intensify or fade, new elements slip in while others disappear entirely. The most vivid memories you possess, the ones you're absolutely certain are accurate, may be the most heavily edited. Your identity isn't built on solid historical ground. It's constructed from stories that evolve with each telling, each remembering, each moment of reflection. Reality doesn't exist until you observe it, and even then, it's not what you think. The double-slit experiment reveals something so bizarre it shatters our basic assumptions about existence. Send a single particle through two slits and it behaves like a wave, going through both slits simultaneously and creating an interference pattern. But the moment you try to observe which slit it goes through, the wave collapses into a particle, choosing just one path. The act of observation doesn't just reveal reality, it creates it. This isn't limited to tiny particles in laboratories. It suggests that consciousness plays an active role in shaping the world we experience. That attention itself is a force that crystallizes possibility into actuality. You are mostly empty space, held together by forces that never actually touch. 9% void, with tiny nuclei surrounded by electron clouds at relatively vast distances. If an atom were the size of a football stadium, its nucleus would be a marble at the center. When you touch something, you're not really making contact. You're experiencing the electromagnetic repulsion between the electron clouds of your atoms and the object's atoms. Solidity is an illusion created by your nervous system to help you navigate a world of forces and fields. You are not made of stuff. You are a pattern of energy that has learned to think it's solid. The universe has no center, yet it expands everywhere at once. We imagine the Big Bang as an explosion from a single point, but that's not accurate. Space itself is expanding uniformly in all directions, creating distance between galaxies without any central reference point. Every observer in the universe sees themselves as stationary, while everything else moves away. This means you're not located somewhere in the universe. You are embedded within an expansion that has no outside, no edge, no privileged position. The cosmos has no middle because it doesn't need one, and paradoxically, this makes every point equally central to the unfolding of space and time. Your gut contains a second brain that influences your thoughts and decisions without your knowledge. The enteric nervous system in your intestines contains over 100 million neurons, more than your spinal cord. This gut brain communicates constantly with your head brain through the vagus nerve, sending signals that affect your mood, memory, and moral judgment. The bacteria in your microbiome produce neurotransmitters that influence your emotions and behavior. When you have a gut feeling about something, it might literally be your intestines making decisions based on chemical and neural processes you're not conscious of. You are not a single mind. You are a colony of influences, a biological democracy where your conscious thoughts are just one voice among many. You replace almost every atom in your body every 7 years, yet you remain you. The physical substance that makes up your flesh, bones, and organs is constantly being recycled. The carbon in your muscles, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, these atoms came from dead stars, passed through countless other organisms, and will continue their journey long after you're gone. Your body is not a thing, but a process, a temporary arrangement of borrowed elements that maintains its pattern while completely replacing its parts. You are more like a river than a rock, a verb rather than a noun, a continuous becoming rather than a static being. These realities exist in the spaces between what we're taught and what science reveals. They whisper that the solid, predictable world we navigate daily is built on quantum uncertainty, neurological illusions, and cosmic mysteries. You are not who you think you are, existing in a universe that is not what it appears to be, experiencing a reality that is far stranger and more malleable than anyone wants to admit. The universe might bend reality whenever you're not looking. Picture yourself walking through your childhood home in a dream. The rooms feel familiar. The hallways stretch in directions you remember, but something is off. You open a door expecting your bedroom and find an ocean. You turn around and the hallway has rearranged itself. The house responds to your attention, shifting and morphing the moment you look away. What if reality works the same way? What if the universe is not a fixed stage where events unfold, but a responsive system that adjusts itself based on where you direct your gaze? What if the very act of not observing allows reality to exist in a state of pure potential, only crystallizing into definite form when consciousness returns to witness it? This isn't fantasy. This is a consequence of quantum mechanics that haunts physicists and philosophers alike. When you're not looking at something, when no measurement is being made, particles exist in what's called a superposition. They occupy multiple states simultaneously, like coins spinning in the air that are neither heads nor tails until they land. But the moment observation returns, the moment consciousness engages, reality snaps into focus. The spinning coin chooses a side. The wave function collapses. What was many becomes one. But here's where it gets strange. What exactly counts as observation? Is it your eyes, a camera, a detector, or something more fundamental, something about awareness itself? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness plays a direct role in shaping reality, that the universe literally waits for you to decide what it should be. Think of reality as a cosmic improv theatre. When you are watching, the actors stick to the script. They play their roles convincingly, maintaining the illusion of a coherent narrative. But the moment you step away, the moment your attention turns elsewhere, the performance dissolves. The actors drop character, the sets rearrange, the script rewrites itself. And when you return, everything snaps back into place, so seamlessly that you never suspect the intermission happened. This creates a profound philosophical vertigo. Because if reality bends when you're not looking, then the world you inhabit is not independent of you. You're not just in the universe, you're collaborating with it. Every time you turn your head, every time you focus your attention, every time you choose to observe one thing instead of another, you're participating in reality's construction. The implications ripple outward, like waves from a stone dropped in still water. If observation shapes reality, then your attention is not passive. It's creative. It's generative. Every moment you spend truly seeing something, you're helping it become more real. And every moment you ignore something, you're allowing it to drift back into the quantum foam of possibility. This might explain why meditation feels so profound, why presence seems to transform ordinary moments into something luminous. When you bring your full attention to the breath, to the sensation of air moving through your nostrils, you're not just noticing what was already there. You're collapsing potential into presence. You're helping the moment crystallize from possibility into actuality. But it also means that your distraction has consequences. When you live on autopilot, when your attention scatters across a dozen half-noticed experiences, you're leaving reality in a state of quantum uncertainty. You're inhabiting a world that's only partially formed, like walking through a house where most of the rooms haven't decided what they want to be yet. And what about memory? If reality shifts when you're not looking, then the past itself becomes suspect. Because you're not continuously observing your memories. They sit in storage, unwitnessed, free to drift and change in the quantum shadows of consciousness. Maybe this is why memories feel so fluid, so unreliable. Maybe every time you recall something, You're not retrieving a fixed file, but collapsing a cloud of possible pasts into one specific version. The memory you access becomes real in that moment, but it might be subtly different from the last time you remembered it. This transforms nostalgia from sentiment into physics. When you long for the past, you're not yearning for something that definitively happened. You're reaching toward a probability cloud of experiences, trying to collapse them into the version that feels most true, most meaningful, most like the story you need to tell about yourself. The good old days aren't memories, they're quantum reconstructions, edited by time and desire into something that may never have existed quite the way you remember it. But perhaps the most unsettling implication is this: if reality bends when you're not looking, then other people's realities might be fundamentally different from yours. When you're not around, when your observation isn't stabilizing their world, they might be inhabiting entirely different versions of the same events. The conversation you had yesterday might exist in several states simultaneously in their memory, only collapsing into one definite version when you meet again and compare notes. This could explain why relationships feel so mysterious, why even people you've known for years can surprise you, seem like strangers, reveal depths you never suspected. Because in a very real sense, they exist differently when you're not there. They're not putting on an act or hiding parts of themselves. They're literally occupying different quantum states of being, different probability clouds of personality and possibility. And if this is true, then loneliness takes on a new meaning. When you're alone, when no one is observing you, you're free to exist in superposition. You can be multiple versions of yourself simultaneously, exploring different emotional states, different possibilities, different ways of being. Solitude isn't absence, it's potential. It's the space where you return to quantum uncertainty, where you remember that you're not just one thing, one fixed identity, but a field of possibilities waiting to be observed into form. Maybe this is why spending time alone feels so essential, so restorative. It's not just about rest or reflection, it's about returning to your fundamental quantum nature, allowing yourself to exist in multiple states simultaneously, letting the rigid certainties of social interaction dissolve back into fluid potential. When you're alone, you're not just yourself. You're all the selves you could be, existing in parallel until the next observation collapses you back into one. So the next time you leave a room and feel the strange sensation that everything behind you has gone quiet, trust that instinct. The universe might indeed be taking a breath, relaxing its performance, allowing reality to soften back into possibility. And when you return, when your attention re-engages, you're not just witnessing the world, you're helping it decide what it wants to be. Reality isn't fixed, it's collaborative. And you're not just an observer, you're a co-creator, shaping the universe with every glance, every focus, every moment of attention. The world bends not because it's broken, but because it's alive, responsive, waiting for your consciousness to give it form. Most of your decisions are made by bacteria you've never met. Imagine living in a house where you think you're the only resident, making all the choices about what to eat, when to sleep, how to feel. But unbeknownst to you, there's an entire city of microscopic tenants living in your basement, and they have opinions, strong opinions, about everything. They're voting on your mood, lobbying for certain foods, influencing your social behavior, and occasionally overriding your conscious decisions entirely. And here's the unsettling part. There are more of them than there are of you. In fact, you're outnumbered roughly 10 to 1. Welcome to the hidden democracy of your microbiome, where bacteria you've never seen cast ballots that determine how you navigate the world. This isn't metaphor. This is microbiology. Your body hosts roughly 39 trillion bacterial cells, compared to about 30 trillion human cells. You are, quite literally, more microbe than human. And these microscopic inhabitants aren't passive passengers. They're active participants in your decision-making process, influencing everything from your food cravings to your social preferences to your risk tolerance. The gut-brain axis, a communication highway between your intestinal bacteria and your central nervous system, carries more traffic than most people realize, and much of that traffic consists of bacterial suggestions about how you should behave. Consider your food cravings. You might think you desire chocolate because you enjoy the taste, or that you crave fermented foods because you've developed sophisticated culinary preferences. But research suggests something more prosaic. Certain bacteria in your gut produce neurochemicals that influence your brain's reward systems. Bacteria that thrive on sugar send signals that make sugary foods more appealing. Microbes that prefer fermented foods can literally make you crave kimchi or kombucha. Your sophisticated palate might actually be bacterial lobbying disguised as personal taste. The influence extends far beyond food. Studies have shown that gut bacteria can affect anxiety levels, social behavior, and even personality traits. Mice with depleted microbiomes become anxious and antisocial. When their gut bacteria are restored, their behavior normalizes. In humans, people with certain bacterial profiles show different levels of neuroticism, extroversion, and openness to experience. The bacteria in your gut might be quietly shaping whether you're the life of the party or prefer to stay home with a book. This creates a strange ontological puzzle. If your decisions are influenced by bacterial preferences, then who exactly is making your choices? When you decide to be social or solitary, adventurous or cautious, are you expressing your authentic self or executing a microbial agenda? The boundaries of selfhood become blurry when you realize that your individual preferences might be the result of a bacterial consortium you never consciously consulted. But it gets stranger. Your microbiome is constantly changing, influenced by what you eat, where you travel, who you spend time with, even how stressed you feel. This means your bacterial democracy is in constant flux, with different microbial constituencies gaining and losing influence over time. The bacteria that make you crave adventure might be different from the ones that make you seek comfort. Your personality, in other words, might be partially determined by which bacterial factions happen to be dominant at any given moment. This has profound implications for the concept of personal growth and change. When you notice your preferences shifting, when you find yourself drawn to new foods or activities or social situations, you might be witnessing a changing of the microbial guard. Your transformation isn't just psychological, it's ecological. You're not just changing your mind, you're changing your inner ecosystem. The connection between bacteria and behavior becomes even more intriguing when you consider that your microbiome is partially inherited and partially acquired. You receive your initial bacterial colonization from your mother during birth, but you continue to collect new microbes throughout your life, from food, environment, and social contact. This means your decision-making patterns are influenced by a complex inheritance that includes not just genes, but germs. The bacteria you carry might reflect your family history, your cultural background, your geographic origins, and your social connections in ways you never realized. And if bacteria influence behavior, then cultural differences in behavior might partly reflect cultural differences in microbiomes. The gut bacteria common in different regions, shaped by local diets and environments, might contribute to regional differences in personality, risk tolerance, and social norms. What we attribute to culture and upbringing might also be microbial. The collective behavior of societies might be partially determined by the collective bacteria they share. This reframes the question of authenticity. If your choices are influenced by bacteria, does that make them less you? Or does it expand the definition of what you includes? Perhaps the self isn't limited to neurons and consciousness, but encompasses the entire ecosystem of life that constitutes your biological existence. Your bacteria aren't foreign invaders, they're part of your extended phenotype, your distributed identity. The therapeutic implications are staggering. If bacteria influence mood and behavior, then treating mental health might involve treating the microbiome. Some researchers are already exploring psychobiotics, bacteria that could be prescribed like antidepressants to improve mental well-being. The idea of taking a probiotic to enhance your mood or personality traits sounds like science fiction, but it's increasingly within the realm of possibility. This also means that the food you eat isn't just fuel, it's a vote in the microbial election that determines your mental state. Every meal shifts the bacterial balance in your gut, potentially altering your mood, energy, and decision-making patterns. You're not just feeding yourself, you're feeding the microscopic democracy that helps govern your behavior. The implications for personal responsibility are complex. If bacteria influence your choices, are you fully accountable for your actions? The question becomes particularly relevant for behaviors like addiction, aggression, or impulsivity, which might be partially mediated by microbial factors. It doesn't eliminate personal responsibility, but it complicates it, suggesting that behavior change might require not just willpower, but ecosystem management. Perhaps most remarkably, this bacterial influence operates entirely below the threshold of consciousness. You don't feel your gut bacteria voting on your next meal choice, or lobbying for a particular social behavior. The influence is subtle, seamless, invisible. You experience their suggestions as your own preferences, their chemical signals as your intuition, their metabolic needs as your cravings. So the next time you find yourself inexplicably drawn to a particular food, or feeling unusually social or solitary, or making a decision that surprises even you, consider the possibility that you're not alone in that choice. You're part of a vast biological collective, a walking ecosystem where trillions of microscopic organisms are constantly casting votes about how you should navigate the world. You're not just making decisions, you're hosting them. And the democracy in your gut never sleeps, never stops voting, never stops shaping the reality you think of as uniquely, individually yours. Your identity is just a story your brain tells itself. Not all prisons have bars. Some are made of sentences stitched together from childhood memories, labels, expectations, and the persistent illusion that there is a single, unchanging you watching it all unfold. Imagine a marionette made of words and symbols dangling not by strings, but by stories, narratives whispered inside your skull from the moment you could form thoughts. These stories don't come from nowhere. They form like sediment, layer by layer. Your name, your culture, the roles you've been told to play, the ones you've rebelled against, the traits you've clung to out of pride or fear or survival. But what if this story, you call me, isn't a window into your true nature, but a kind of mask, a well-rehearsed monologue that your brain performs to make sense of chaos? What if the self, as you know it, is more like a character in a novel than a fact of biology? And what if that character changes slightly every time you remember it? Your identity feels solid because it's repeated constantly, like a favourite song on loop. The refrain becomes familiar. I'm the kind of person who, or that's just who I am. But underneath those refrains is something unstable, something shifting. Neurologically, there's no single self-center in the brain. Instead, identity is the result of distributed processes. Memory recall, sensory integration, emotional regulation, pattern recognition. These processes aren't lined up like soldiers. They're scattered like stars, blinking on and off, depending on mood, circumstance, and context. And your brain doesn't track a true you beneath all that. It simply pieces together a working narrative, a best-guess storyline that allows you to function socially, emotionally, and psychologically. You aren't a static truth. You're a story told in present tense being revised in real time. Think of your mind like a theatre director who's lost the original script. Each day, it assembles a version of the character you're playing, drawing from fragments of memory, habits, feedback from others, and cultural scripts. The stage lights rise, and there you are again, remembering who you're supposed to be. but the performance is adaptive. Around parents, you become the obedient child. Around friends, the witty storyteller. At work, the competent professional. Alone, you shift yet again, often into someone more vulnerable, more quiet, or more lost. These shifts don't mean you're fake. They mean you're fluid. The self is not a sculpture, but a stream. And yet the story insists otherwise, because a story demands continuity, a protagonist, a moral arc. And so your brain edits out contradictions, rationalizes inconsistencies, and fills in the blanks, like a novelist desperate to meet a deadline. The truth is messy. The self is curated. Even your memories, the pillars of your personal history, are not objective files, but reconstructed hallucinations. Each time you recall a memory, you rewrite it slightly, influenced by your current mood, beliefs, and expectations. Studies have shown that your memories aren't stored like videos, but like puzzle pieces, fragmented, interpretive, malleable. So the you that you remember, the brave one, the awkward one, the hurt one, is a blend of what actually happened and what you needed it to mean. This creates a psychological illusion, continuity. You feel like you've been the same person your whole life, but you haven't. You've been evolving, molting skins, shifting values, forgetting core truths, inventing new ones. And still, the story stitches these eras together, like beads on a string. Because the alternative, that you're a drifting, inconsistent creature of the present, would be too disorienting to bear. Let's use a metaphor. Picture a book written in invisible ink. You can't see the words until a special light shines on them. Each morning when you wake up, your brain is that light, revealing a version of the story of you, but the ink changes over time. What you see today might differ from yesterday. A paragraph that once comforted you now reads like a lie. A chapter you forgot reappears with new meaning. And the deeper truth, there is no master copy, no authoritative edition, only this ever-changing book that feels permanent because it's all you've ever known. You are the reader and the author, the narrator and the protagonist all at once, editing, rewriting, and sometimes skipping entire pages without realizing it. And this fluidity, while destabilizing at first, is also a kind of freedom. It means you're not trapped by your past. It means you can evolve. The story can change. You can decide that the chapter labeled failure was actually a turning point, that the villain was misunderstood, that the supporting character who left wasn't your whole plot. This doesn't mean lying to yourself. It means recognizing that the self was never a photograph, but a painting, one you've been layering for years. And like all paintings, it can be touched up, reinterpreted, even transformed into something new. This is why therapy can work, why journaling helps, why traveling changes you, because they all offer you new lenses, new lights to shine on the invisible ink. But there's a catch. Stories seek coherence. They resist chaos. When something happens that doesn't fit the narrative, betrayal, trauma, radical insight, your brain either distorts it to fit or shatters the story entirely. This is what identity crisis looks like. Not a loss of truth, but a rupture in storytelling. Suddenly the main character doesn't make sense anymore. Suddenly the plot is unclear. These moments hurt, but they also hold potential. In the silence after the story breaks, you can listen more closely to what's real. You can separate who you are from who you've been pretending to be. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I've always been this way," pause. Ask yourself who wrote that line. Was it a teacher, a parent, a fear, a wound? And is it still true or just familiar? The self is sticky. We cling to it because it grounds us. But sometimes to grow, you have to let go of the old script. You have to step off the stage, wipe off the makeup, and sit quietly in the dark theatre seats, listening not to the performance, but to the silence beneath it. In the end, maybe identity isn't a thing you have, but a story you tell. And like all good stories, it changes as you do, which means you're not broken for evolving. You're not lost for questioning. You're not fake for having many faces. You are human, alive in the paradox of being both narrator and narrative. And the most powerful thing you can do, perhaps, is not to find yourself, but to become the kind of author who writes with honesty, courage, and the willingness to edit. Because the story of you isn't finished, and it never was. Free will might be biologically impossible. Imagine walking into a grand control room, the kind found in sci-fi movies. Rows of glowing buttons, walls lined with levers, a massive central screen displaying your every move. You approach the main console, expecting to find yourself in charge. But there's a problem. None of the buttons work. The screen doesn't respond to your commands. You press, pull, shout, but everything has already been decided. And worse, it all still plays out as if you're in control. That illusion, the sense that you're piloting the ship, is comforting. But what if your mind is more like that powerless operator, witnessing decisions after they've already been made, narrating actions it never truly chose? This is the unsettling idea at the heart of modern neuroscience. That free will, as we understand it, might not exist, not because we don't act, but because we don't choose in the way we think we do. What if your sense of agency is less like a steering wheel and more like a rear-view mirror reflecting a road already travelled? Let's start with the science. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted a now famous experiment. He asked participants to move their finger whenever they felt the urge. Using electrodes to monitor brain activity, Libet discovered something strange. The brain showed signs of preparing the movement before the participant became aware of deciding. That is the readiness potential. A measurable spike of neural activity came before conscious intention. You didn't decide, then act. You acted, then noticed. This finding rocked our understanding of choice. Since then, the research has deepened. Later experiments using fMRI and more sensitive tools have shown that scientists can predict a subject's decision several seconds before they report making it. Not always with 100% accuracy, but with eerie reliability, enough to raise a disturbing question. If your brain starts the process before you're aware, then who exactly is in charge? Your conscious mind, it turns out, may be more of a storyteller than a commander. Think of it like a press secretary explaining decisions to the public after the fact, smoothing over inconsistencies, inventing coherence where there is none. But your brain might have nudged your arm that direction based on subconscious emotional cues, temperature, or memories you didn't even register. And yet, once the action occurs, your mind builds a narrative to make it feel deliberate. This isn't deception, it's survival. The illusion of control helps us function. It gives us moral frameworks, accountability, and a sense of identity. But the illusion, no matter how useful, remains an illusion. Now consider your daily life. How often do you choose your thoughts? You're walking and suddenly an idea appears uninvited. You're talking and a phrase slips out that you didn't plan. Emotions surge without warning. Desires arise without permission. You didn't decide to be attracted to that person, or to feel irritated in traffic, or to fear rejection. Those experiences bubbled up from somewhere deeper, below the surface of your conscious awareness. And once they do, your mind scrambles to justify them. I yelled because they disrespected me, or I bought that because it was on sale. But those are post hoc rationalizations. The real decision was made silently, invisibly, and the explanation is a kind of cover story. This brings us to a metaphor. Your mind as a haunted house, full of rooms you've never visited. You think you live only in the front foyer, well lit and organized. But behind closed doors, ghosts stir. Old traumas, forgotten memories, inherited beliefs, biological drives. You hear footsteps upstairs and convince yourself you made them. You feel a chill and say it's your choice to shiver. But the house is alive in ways you can't fully control. The deeper forces, evolution, chemistry, environment, move through you, around you, sometimes as you, and all the while your conscious mind insists that it is the architect, not just the tenant. To be fair, this doesn't mean we are robots. You're not helpless. You can reflect, question, redirect, but those abilities are tools your biology gave you, not proof of autonomy. Even your capacity to pause and reconsider was shaped by genes, neurons, and nurture. You didn't build the system. You just woke up inside it. Consider habits. They form through repetition, not decision. You don't choose to crave sugar after years of indulging it. You don't select your accent, your biases, your comfort zones. They arrive as defaults, installed early, updated by experience, hard to uninstall, and yet you feel free. Why? Because your brain evolved to protect that feeling. A creature that doubts its own agency might hesitate, falter, collapse. Belief in free will fuels motivation, ambition, even love. It gives us a sense of responsibility. But perhaps responsibility can still exist without the illusion. Maybe it means guiding the forces within us, not being their source, but their steward. Think of a surfer on a wave. The surfer didn't make the wave. They didn't choose when or how it would rise, but they can ride it skillfully, clumsily, courageously. The wave is nature. The ride is art. And free will, if it exists at all, is the space between impulse and action. Tiny, flickering, but real enough to matter. But this space is not infinite. It's shaped by genes, hormones, culture, context. A child born into war, poverty, or trauma doesn't have the same internal levers as one born into safety and love. Our choices emerge from a landscape we did not design. That's why compassion matters. That's why judgment fails. When we punish someone for bad behavior, we often assume they could have chosen differently. But science suggests otherwise. Their brain, their past, their wiring, all of it pushed them toward that act. Does this mean we stop holding people accountable? No. But it does mean we should hold them with understanding, not just blame. The legal system, education, religion, all these rely on the belief in free will. Without it, our structures wobble. But maybe they don't have to collapse. Maybe we shift the narrative. Instead of "you freely chose this," we say, "this happened through you." What now? The focus becomes not past guilt, but future possibility. Rehabilitation over retribution. Curiosity over condemnation. And personally, what does this mean for you? It means being humble. It means accepting that not all your thoughts are yours, that your anger might be inherited, that your dreams might be echoes of unmet needs. But it also means you're not stuck. The brain is plastic. Change is possible. You can't erase the architecture, but you can renovate. You can plant new stories, disrupt patterns, invite better ghosts. The self, then, is not a king ruling over the mind, but a ship floating in currents, adjusting sails, reading stars, learning to navigate. And free will? Maybe it's not the freedom to choose anything, but the awareness to see what's choosing for you. Maybe it's the brief moment you notice the puppet strings and, with grace, learn to dance anyway. So the next time you act and feel the rush of certainty, "I chose this," pause. Ask yourself where the desire came from. Who shaped it? When did it start? What does it serve? The more you ask, the more you see. The control room is deeper than you imagined. The buttons still glow. The screen still moves. But somewhere behind the curtain, the script is already in motion. And your role is not to write it from scratch, but to read it well, question it fiercely, and when possible, improvise a better ending. Reality changes when you observe it. The double-slit experiment explained. Imagine walking into a room where two doors stand side by side. Simple, solid, unmoving. You take a step toward one, expecting a predictable outcome. But just as you reach for the handle, both doors flicker, blend, shimmer, as if the choice to look has changed not only what you see, but what exists. Now imagine that instead of doors, these are particles. And instead of a room, it's the very fabric of reality. This isn't a dream or a philosophical thought experiment. It's the foundation of one of the most famous and unsettling discoveries in quantum physics, the double-slit experiment. It's a test so elegant, so deceptive in its simplicity that it has revealed a secret about the universe that continues to haunt physicists and philosophers alike. Because what it shows is this: reality behaves differently depending on whether you're watching. The act of observation isn't passive, it's participatory. When you look, the world decides. When you don't, it hesitates as if existence itself is waiting for your attention before it becomes real. And that's not a metaphor, that's experimental fact. What began as a curiosity has become a doorway into something far stranger. A reality where cause and effect bend to awareness, and where your perception might not just reflect the world, but shape it. Here's how it works. You take a single particle, say an electron, and you shoot it at a barrier with two narrow slits. Behind that barrier is a screen that records where the electron lands. You expect it to go through one slit or the other, like a marble tossed through a fence, but what you find is something else entirely. When you're not observing the electron's path, when you simply let it fly, it doesn't act like a particle. It acts like a wave. It interferes with itself, as if it passed through both slits at once. The result is an interference pattern on the screen. Dark and light bands like ripples from two stones tossed into a pond. But here's where it gets eerie. The moment you add a detector to see which slit it went through, the pattern changes. The electron now behaves like a particle. It chooses one slit. The interference disappears. The wave collapses. And the only thing that changed was your decision to observe. Not the setup, not the mechanics, just the act of looking. It's as if the particle was undecided about what it wanted to be until you asked, as if the question itself defined the answer. And this defies everything you've ever been taught about how the world works. Think of it like a book that rewrites itself when you read it. When your eyes are closed, the story is fluid, branching, full of parallel possibilities. But the moment you turn the page, one narrative locks into place. One version becomes reality, and the others vanish as if they were never real at all. The double-slit experiment reveals that particles exist in a superposition, multiple states at once until observation collapses them into a single state. They are waves of probability smeared across outcomes like a future not yet chosen. And when you observe them, the wave function collapses into one result. But what does that really mean? It means the universe isn't solid in the way you think. It's a field of potential waiting to be resolved by your awareness. Not your eyes per se, but the presence of information, of measurement, of interaction. Reality, then, is not independent, it's relational. It emerges through contact. And this flips the classic narrative. We grow up believing the world is out there, fixed, definite, and that we simply peek into it like observers at a zoo. But what if the act of observing is more like sculpting than watching? What if your perception is a chisel carving reality from the marble of possibility? The double-slit experiment suggests that we are not detached witnesses to a pre-written script, but co-authors, co-creators. The observer is not outside the story. They are the story's pivot. And this isn't a fluke. It's been repeated, confirmed, refined for decades. Single particles, multiple detectors, even delayed choice versions, where the decision to observe is made after the particle has passed, and still the pattern changes. Time doesn't matter. Sequence doesn't matter. It's as if the universe doesn't finalize its behavior until it knows how you're going to look at it. As if it's waiting for your question before committing to an answer. And that changes everything. Because if the particle's past behavior depends on your future choice to observe, then causality, the sacred arrow from cause to effect, starts to bend. It's no longer clear that A leads to B. Sometimes B seems to reach backward and shape A. And while this might seem like a trick of experimental design, it echoes through the very mathematics of quantum mechanics: superposition, entanglement, collapse. These are not poetic ideas. They are rigorously defined predictive frameworks that match reality with extraordinary precision. But they tell a story that sounds anything but mechanical. They whisper of a universe that's alive in its ambiguity, a universe that resists definition until definition is demanded. And the implications reach far beyond particles. They reach into consciousness, into free will, into the fabric of what it means to exist. Because if reality doesn't settle until observed, then what is observation? Is it merely a detector clicking in a lab? Or is it something more, something like awareness? Some physicists have speculated that consciousness itself may play a role in the collapse of the wave function, that the mind might not just observe the world, but participate in its creation. This is controversial, unproven, but it refuses to go away, because the deeper we look into the quantum realm, the more it seems that the boundary between observer and observed is an illusion, that the two are entangled, not just mathematically, but metaphysically. And this leads to a chilling thought. What if the world only becomes real when you believe in it? Think of dreams. When you're inside one, it feels real. You react, you fear, you love, but the landscape shifts with your attention. Walls disappear, people transform, logic collapses. The world molds itself to the contours of your focus. And when you wake, you realize it was never fixed, it was responsive. Now apply that same logic to waking life. What if the solidity you perceive is simply the universe stabilizing itself around your conscious gaze? What if your choices carve the quantum fog into matter and meaning? Then the double-slit experiment is not just about electrons, it's about you. It's about how you collapse your own reality every moment of your life, how you are surrounded by infinite futures, each one flickering with potential, until you step forward and force the universe to choose. This isn't mysticism, it's math. But the math points to a truth that mystics have whispered for centuries. That reality is participatory, not passive. That the world you see is not separate from the one who sees it. And this means your role in the universe is not small, it is essential. You are not an ant beneath the stars. You are the lens through which the stars know themselves. You are not a body in space. You are the instrument through which space becomes experience. And once you see this, once you truly understand what the double-slit experiment is saying, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to believing that the world just is. You realize that it becomes, and that your attention is the trigger. So what does this mean for your everyday life? It means your focus matters, your curiosity matters, your willingness to ask questions matters, because the universe seems to respond not to indifference, but to inquiry. Every time you look closely, every time you pay attention, you are calling something into being. And every time you turn away, that thing retreats into ambiguity. This is not metaphor. This is physics. The double-slit experiment is a mirror. It shows you that uncertainty is not a failure. It's a feature. That reality is not a fixed wall, but a flexible field. And that you are not stuck in it. You are weaving it. And maybe that's the secret the universe has been trying to tell us all along. Not through thunder or prophecy, but through particles and patterns. That existence is a dance, not a monologue. That we are not here to witness, but to co-create. That reality doesn't unfold in spite of us, but because of us. So the next time you feel small, lost, irrelevant, remember this. A single particle waits for your gaze before deciding what to be. A single question reshapes the outcome. And if that's true for electrons, then maybe it's true for your choices, your relationships, your dreams. Maybe your life too exists in a superposition of what could be until you look, until you choose, until you observe it into form. You could technically be immortal in another branch of the multiverse. Imagine standing at a hallway lined with mirrors. Not just two mirrors facing each other, but thousands stacked side by side, each reflecting a slightly different version of you. One mirror shows you with a different haircut, another wearing different clothes, a third standing beside someone you never met in this life. As you step forward, the reflections become stranger. In one, you're smiling at a stranger who feels familiar. In another, you're wearing a uniform you never owned, holding a trophy you've never won. The hallway stretches on endlessly, and the unsettling realization sets in. These are not reflections, they are realities, each one as valid as the life you're living right now, each one a version of you that took a different path. And suddenly your sense of self begins to fracture. Not into confusion, but into expansion. Because if the universe is infinite, then so are you. This idea isn't just science fiction. It's rooted in the unsettling implications of quantum physics and cosmology. In quantum mechanics, particles don't commit to a single state until they're observed. Until then, they exist in a superposition, multiple possibilities at once. The famous double-slit experiment showed that particles act like waves of probabilities until someone looks. Once observed, the wave collapses into a definite outcome. But the many worlds interpretation, one of the leading explanations, proposes something more radical. It suggests that the wave function doesn't collapse. Instead, every possible outcome happens in separate parallel universes. When you flip a coin, in one universe, it lands heads. In another, tails. In yet another, it flips forever. And the same principle might apply to you. Your choices, your regrets, your unlived lives. If that's true, then right now, in this moment, there are countless versions of you walking different roads. Some are almost identical. Same thoughts, same memories, just one breath ahead or behind. Others are wildly different. In one, you moved to that city you only dreamed of. In another, you never met the person who broke your heart. In a third, you pursued the passion you abandoned for safety. And in a fourth, you're not even human. Each version unfolds like a branch on a cosmic tree, growing outward with every decision, every possibility, every particle interaction. You are not a single line. You are a multiverse of potential. It's tempting to think of these other versions as what-ifs or fantasies, but according to the physics, they are just as real as this one. You just happen to be experiencing this thread. Consciousness, in this view, is not fixed to one universe. It's a flashlight sweeping across pages of a book where all the stories exist simultaneously. Your awareness makes one narrative feel real, but the others are still there, running in parallel, just out of reach. And if you could somehow shift your attention like tuning a radio, you might wake up in a different life, with no memory of the one you're in now. That life wouldn't feel alternate, it would feel like the only one. And maybe that's already happened many times. Now the metaphysical implications begin to ripple. If there are infinite versions of you, each making different choices, what does that mean for free will? Are you the author of your life, or just one version of yourself reading one outcome? It's easy to feel disoriented. But there's also something liberating in this idea. It means that no single decision defines you completely. That mistakes don't lock you in. That possibility is a law, not a luxury. It means that for every door you didn't open, there is a version of you who did. For every goodbye you regret, another you said yes. You are not the sum of one story. You are the intersection of countless narratives. And the paradox deepens. Because while this may sound empowering, it also introduces a kind of existential vertigo. If all outcomes happen, what does it matter what you choose? Why strive? Why care? But the truth is your experience is still real. You still feel pain, joy, regret, love. Your story matters because you're living it. Even if there are others, even if there are infinite paths, this one is yours. And perhaps that's what gives it meaning. Not its uniqueness, but your presence within it. Think of the multiverse like a library. Infinite books on infinite shelves. Each book is your life written differently. Some are thrillers, some are tragedies. Some are so similar they differ by a single sentence. Others are unrecognizable. But you can only read one at a time. Your consciousness is the reader. And even if the other books exist, this is the one you're inside. And so the question is not which is the real you, but what will you do with the page you're on? This idea has been echoed in art, in religion, in dreams. The concept of parallel selves is ancient. In some myths, there are spirit doubles, shadow selves, astral twins. In dreams, you might visit places you've never been, speak languages you don't know, live lifetimes in seconds. What if those aren't creations, but glimpses? What if your mind in sleep or silence crosses universes without knowing? What if déjà vu is not memory but resonance, two versions of you brushing past each other for a flicker of time? The psychological weight of this realization can be profound. You start to see yourself not as a single identity, but as a pattern, a structure that repeats with variations. And that reframes everything. When you fail, you remember somewhere you succeeded. When you hesitate, you remember someone with your face was brave. When you feel alone, you realize across the stars, you are never alone. You are everywhere. And that thought, though cosmic, can be intimate because it reminds you that you're not trapped. You're not doomed by your past, you're fluid. But be careful. This isn't an excuse to escape accountability. You can't say another version of me made the right choice, so I don't have to. That's like watching another person exercise and expecting to get fit. Your actions here still shape your experience. This is your branch of the tree. You water it or you don't. You write or you erase. The other versions may exist, but they are not living this moment. Only you are. So what do you do with this knowledge? You stop living like your story is fixed. You stop treating your life like a narrow hallway and start seeing it as a field, a vast open field of choices, each one blossoming in different directions. You stop fearing regret, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines you. And you start to walk forward with curiosity, not certainty. Because if the multiverse is real, then life is not a sentence, it's a language. And every version of you is speaking a different dialect of the same truth. I am possible. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, another you is listening. Your memory is rewritten every time you recall it. Think of your memory like a soft wax tablet rather than a locked vault. Each time you press into it, each time you revisit a moment, it reshapes. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but subtly, quietly. A small edge blurs. A detail shifts. A sound that never happened is suddenly there. A glance becomes a stare. A neutral phrase takes on a tone. You don't notice the change because the new version feels just as real, sometimes more so, but it's no longer the memory you once had. Every recollection is a rewrite, not a replay. Your mind is not retrieving a file, it's repainting a scene, and with each stroke, it introduces variations that blend with what you believe is truth. And just like that, memory transforms into myth. We like to think of memories as frozen snapshots, clean, crisp, preserved, but neuroscience paints a different picture. Memories are reconstructions, not recordings. When you remember something, your brain doesn't retrieve a perfect image. It rebuilds the experience from fragments, bits of sight, sound, emotion, and context, and assembles them into a coherent story. It uses clues from the present to fill in the gaps from the past. And in doing so, it often alters the original. The more emotionally charged a memory is, the more it gets rehearsed, and paradoxically, the more it becomes vulnerable to distortion. Your most vivid memories, the ones you're sure are accurate, may be the most revised. One of the most striking studies on memory distortion came from psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. In her research, she demonstrated how easily people's recollections could be manipulated. By simply changing a word in a question, she could alter a subject's memory of a car crash. How fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Led to higher speed estimates than hit. And more than that, participants recalled seeing broken glass, even when there was none. This isn't about gullibility, it's about the mechanics of memory itself. Your brain doesn't store the past, it constructs a version of it using current input as scaffolding. This phenomenon isn't just academic, it's deeply personal. Think about a childhood memory, perhaps of a family trip, a favourite toy, a moment of shame or joy. You've told the story many times, it's become part of your identity. But what if parts of it aren't real? What if over the years your brain, trying to protect you or make sense of the moment, subtly edited the facts? Maybe someone else's memory seeped into yours. Maybe your interpretation hardened into certainty. Maybe your narrative replaced reality. This isn't deception. It's how the mind works. And once you know this, your sense of self begins to shift. Because who are you if not a collection of memories? And what are those memories if not fiction blended with fact? The implications are profound. It means that memory is malleable, that every time you tell a story about your past, you're not just recounting it, you're rewriting it. Not just for others, but for yourself. And each retelling reinforces the new version. This is why eyewitness testimony can be so unreliable. Why two siblings can remember the same event in drastically different ways. Why you might argue with someone over what really happened, and both of you are sure you're right. You're both telling the truth, and you're both wrong. But memory distortion isn't always harmful. Sometimes it's protective. Your brain may soften painful details to shield you. It may cast someone in a kind light to preserve a connection. It may blur trauma to allow you to move forward. These aren't flaws, they're functions. Your mind is constantly editing your narrative, not just for accuracy, but for survival. It prioritizes meaning over precision, continuity over chronology, and in doing so, it keeps you sane, even if it means telling you stories that didn't exactly happen the way you think they did. Still, this raises unsettling questions. If your memories are unreliable, how can you trust your experiences? How can you be sure of what shaped you? And if identity is built on memory, then who are you really? The answer isn't to distrust yourself entirely, but to become more aware of the storytelling nature of memory. To hold your past not as a rigid truth, but as a living document, one that breathes and shifts and reflects, not just what was, but who you are now. Because memory isn't static, it evolves with you. Let's shift the metaphor. Picture your memory as a palimpsest, a manuscript that's been written on, erased and rewritten multiple times. Beneath the visible text are traces of earlier versions, faint but not gone. When you recall something, you're not reading the original ink. You're reading a layered version, coloured by mood, perspective, and context. Sometimes the newer writing overwrites the old entirely. Sometimes it blends, and sometimes the original seeps through in unexpected ways. Dreams, triggers, flashbacks, but it's never untouched, never pure. This dynamic also explains why nostalgia feels so powerful. When you remember the good old days, your brain isn't giving you a neutral snapshot. It's highlighting the pleasant parts and downplaying the rest. The lighting is warmer, the people more kind, the moments more meaningful. This isn't dishonesty, it's design. Nostalgia is your brain's way of comforting you, of stitching continuity between who you were and who you are. But it's also a kind of illusion. You miss a version of the past that may never have existed the way you recall. And what about collective memory? Entire societies remember events differently. History books tell one story, oral traditions tell another. Myths emerge, persist, evolve. Cultures pass down narratives that shape identity and behaviour. But these too are subject to the same distortions, reshaped by each generation, each retelling. A nation's memory is as fluid as an individual's. And just like personal memory, it can be manipulated through repetition, emotion, and omission. Propaganda, nostalgia, revisionism, they all tap into this vulnerability, and the result is a shared history that feels unshakable, but is at its core malleable. This isn't all doom and fragility. There's beauty in it too, because if memory can be rewritten, it can also be rewritten with intention. You can revisit painful moments and reinterpret them. You can take a story of failure and find growth in it. You can look at a regret and extract wisdom. You're not trapped by your past. You're in conversation with it. And each time you remember, you have a chance to reshape how it lives in you. Ultimately, memory is not about perfect recall. It's about constructing a coherent self. Your brain weaves experiences into a narrative that allows you to function, to relate, to make decisions. Precision is sacrificed for continuity. Truth bends to make room for meaning. And perhaps that's what makes memory so human. Not its accuracy, but its fluidity. It's a canvas that's never finished, a film that edits itself in real time, a book with shifting chapters. So next time you recall a moment, especially one that defines you, pause. Ask yourself, is this how it really happened, or how I need it to have happened? Not to doubt yourself, but to understand yourself. Because every memory is a mosaic, part reality, part dream, part narrative. And the more you engage with that mosaic, the more whole you become. The universe might be fine-tuned for conscious life. Picture a vast cosmic safe, the kind you see in spy films. It has dozens of dials, hundreds of switches, each one representing a different fundamental constant of the universe. One dial sets the strength of gravity. Another determines the mass of the electron. Another, the expansion rate of space. Every setting must be precise down to decimal points that make human precision seem like finger painting. Now imagine that this safe against impossible odds has been opened. Not by accident, but perfectly aligned to allow life. Not just atoms, not just stars, but consciousness, awareness, you. And suddenly you have to ask the question most people spend their lives avoiding. Is it a fluke, or is it a clue? The idea that the universe might be fine-tuned for life, specifically for conscious life, is not philosophy dressed in mystery. It's physics rubbing up against awe. Let's start with what fine-tuning really means. In the equations that govern the cosmos, the constants like the speed of light, the gravitational constant, the strength of the strong nuclear force are not arbitrary. They are fixed, but they didn't have to be. The equations could have had different values. And here's the catch. Even the slightest tweak to some of these numbers would render the universe lifeless. If gravity were just a hair stronger, stars would burn out too fast. A touch weaker, and stars wouldn't form at all. If the strong nuclear force were marginally different, atoms wouldn't hold together. If the expansion rate of the universe had been just a little faster after the Big Bang, matter would have flown apart and galaxies never formed. We live, it seems, in a narrow habitable zone, not just on Earth, but in physics itself, like balancing a pencil on its tip for billions of years, and somehow it stays upright. This isn't mystical speculation. It's an observable tension in the fabric of cosmology. The constants of nature appear suspiciously just right. And they're not just right for any kind of universe. They're right for a universe that contains observers. This is where consciousness enters the frame. Because the laws of physics don't just permit atoms, they permit thoughts. They allow for organisms to develop senses, self-awareness, morality, and meaning. And if that doesn't unsettle you, you haven't understood it. It's one thing for a universe to permit planets and suns. It's another for it to permit Shakespeare, Mozart, the feeling of falling in love, the taste of strawberries, the sound of rain. The question isn't just why is the universe habitable? It's why is it so richly habitable that life not only survives but wonders? Some argue it's just coincidence that there are trillions of universes and we just happen to be in the one that works. Like buying 1 billion lottery tickets and being shocked that one of them won. This is the multiverse theory, an infinite field of universes, each with different constants, most sterile, most dead, but some like ours teeming with possibility. In this view, we're not special, just lucky, like a fish marvelling at how perfectly water supports swimming, forgetting that fish can't live where water isn't. But there's another possibility, one that feels dangerous to speak aloud, because it edges close to design. What if the universe wasn't just one among many, but built this way, either by necessity or intention? What if consciousness isn't an accident of matter, but its goal? That's the unsettling edge of the fine-tuning idea. It suggests that reality from the moment of its birth was tilted toward awareness, that atoms yearned to become brains, that the laws of nature were coded to give rise not just to movement, but to meaning. This doesn't require belief in a god or an engineer. It only requires acknowledging how fragile this arrangement is. Think of it like tuning a violin. If any string is off, the melody collapses. our universe sings in perfect harmony. Not just by having instruments, but by allowing a song to emerge, a song that hears itself. That's the miracle. Not just that life exists, but that life can ask why. That the universe is not silent, but self-aware through us. Most of the brain's processing is unconscious. Imagine trying to operate the world's most complex supercomputer blindfolded, with no manual, and only the soft hum of its fans to hint that it's even on. That's your life, because the brain you live with, the brain you think you understand, is not only vastly more powerful than anything humans have ever built, it's also largely hidden from you. You think you're the driver of your thoughts, the originator of your choices, the captain of your consciousness, but in truth, you're more like a passenger in a ship that's already halfway to its destination by the time you realize you're even on board. Most of what your brain does, it does without your permission, without your awareness, and without leaving a trace. From interpreting billions of bits of sensory data every second to coordinating complex muscular actions, to shaping your emotional responses, and even scripting the illusion of your free will. The unconscious mind is the architect behind the curtain, and the conscious self, the one that thinks it's in control, is more like a narrator trying to keep up with a story that's already been written. You don't decide what to feel, you notice what you're feeling. You don't choose your thoughts, you discover them like echoes from a deeper chamber. And by the time those echoes reach your awareness, they've already shaped what you're going to do next. The metaphor is simple. Imagine a theatre. On stage is the conscious mind, the actor, the voice, the script. But beneath the stage is a labyrinth of machinery. Pulleys, levers, spotlights, audio cues, all working in harmony to create the illusion of a seamless performance. That's your unconscious brain. It moves the props, it changes the lighting, it builds the scene before you ever step into it. Even the strongest forces in the universe work only in the smallest spaces. They told you that power means reach, that strength is measured by how far it extends, how much it can command from a distance. You picture gravity holding galaxies together across millions of light years, electromagnetic forces crackling through the air, the nuclear forces that power stars burning bright enough to be seen across the cosmos. These seem like the titans of physics, the forces that shape everything. But here's what they didn't tell you. The most powerful force in the universe, stronger than all the others combined, works only in spaces so small you could never see them, never touch them, never even imagine them. It's called the strong nuclear force, and it operates exclusively within the nucleus of atoms, across distances measured in femtometers, spaces so tiny that if you scaled an atom up to the size of a football stadium, this force would work only in a region smaller than a marble at the center. And yet, without it, nothing would exist. Not you, not the stars, not matter itself. This force is 100 times stronger than electromagnetism, 10,000 times stronger than the weak nuclear force, and an almost incomprehensible 100 billion trillion times stronger than gravity. But it has a catch. It only works when things are incredibly, impossibly close. Step even slightly outside its range, and it vanishes completely, as if it never existed at all. It's like having the power to move mountains, but only if you're standing close enough to whisper to them. And this creates one of the most beautiful paradoxes in physics. The thing that holds everything together works only in the smallest spaces. The force that prevents reality from flying apart operates in a realm so intimate, so hidden, that we experience its effects without ever feeling its presence. Think about what this means. Every atom in your body, every breath you take, every star that burns in the sky exists because protons, which should repel each other violently, are held together by this invisible, unimaginably strong force that works only when they're practically touching. It's as if the universe runs on the principle that true strength doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to dominate vast distances or announce itself across space. It just needs to hold the center when everything else would fall apart. And maybe that's the most profound metaphor hidden in the heart of physics, that the greatest power is often the most intimate. That strength isn't about reach but about depth, that the forces that matter most work not across galaxies, but across the spaces between heartbeats, between words, between moments of choice. You begin to see this pattern everywhere. The love that holds a family together doesn't broadcast itself across continents. It works in kitchens, in quiet conversations, in the small spaces where people choose to stay when leaving would be easier. The trust that builds between friends isn't measured in grand gestures, but in tiny consistencies, moments so small they're almost invisible, yet strong enough to survive years of distance and change. The courage that changes lives doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It whispers in the gap between fear and action, in spaces so brief and intimate that only you know they existed. And like the strong nuclear force, these intimate strengths often go unnoticed, unappreciated, unmeasured by the world's instruments, but they hold everything together. Consider your own life. What are the forces that keep you intact when everything else would scatter you? They're probably not the obvious ones, not the achievements that others see or the successes that make headlines. They're more likely the small daily acts of holding yourself together, the way you choose hope over despair in the quiet moment before sleep, the way you forgive yourself for yesterday's mistakes, the way you show up again and again, even when no one is watching, even when the progress is invisible, even when the only applause comes from your own stubborn refusal to give up. These are your strong nuclear forces. They don't extend far. They don't impress from a distance, but they work in the spaces that matter most, the intimate core of who you are, holding your sense of self together when every other force would tear it apart. And here's the beautiful irony. Because this force only works at close range, it creates something extraordinary. Intimacy becomes a superpower. The closer you get to someone, the stronger the bonds can become. Not just metaphorically, but structurally, physically, emotionally. When people say they want to get closer to someone, they're not just speaking poetically. They're describing a fundamental law of connection. The strongest forces require the shortest distances. Love isn't weakened by proximity. It's strengthened by it. Trust doesn't diminish when people get too close. It becomes more powerful. Understanding doesn't fade when you see someone up close. It deepens because you're finally operating in the range where the strongest forces can work. But this also means that strength requires vulnerability. To access the most powerful forces in the universe, you have to be willing to get close enough to be hurt. Close enough that if something goes wrong, you feel it completely. The strong nuclear force works only when particles are essentially touching, when they're sharing the same space, when their boundaries become meaningless. And maybe that's what intimacy is. Not the absence of boundaries, but the willingness to let the strongest forces work in the spaces where boundaries dissolve. Where you end and another begins becomes less important than what you can build together in that small, powerful space between. This changes how you think about resilience too. You might imagine that strength means being able to withstand forces from far away, being impervious to distant threats, maintaining your composure no matter what storms rage on the horizon. But the strong nuclear force suggests something different. That true resilience comes from having something at your core so tightly bound, so fundamentally stable, that external pressures can't reach it. It's not about building walls to keep the world out. It's about having something at your center so well held that it can weather anything. And that something is usually small, quiet, intimate. A core belief that doesn't need to justify itself to others. A love that doesn't require external validation. A sense of purpose that operates independently of applause or recognition. The strong nuclear force also teaches us about proportion. In a cosmos where gravity shapes galaxies and electromagnetic forces power civilizations, the strongest force of all works in spaces smaller than the wavelength of visible light. It suggests that the universe doesn't measure importance by scale. That significance isn't about size. that the most crucial work often happens in the places no one can see, in the small decisions that seem insignificant but hold everything else together. Your daily choice to be kind when you could be cruel. Your decision to tell the truth when lying would be easier. Your commitment to showing up when absence would go unnoticed. These aren't grand gestures. They're strong nuclear forces working in the intimate spaces of character, holding your integrity together, one tiny choice at a time. And maybe this is why modern life often feels so fragile, so scattered, so prone to falling apart. We've become obsessed with forces that work at a distance. We measure our worth by how many people follow us, how far our influence extends, how much we can control from afar. We've forgotten the power of intimacy, of proximity, of the small spaces where the strongest forces operate. We try to build our lives like galaxies held together by the weak pull of distant attractions, when we should be building them like atoms, with something unimaginably strong at the core, surrounded by the small, intimate forces that actually hold things together. The strong nuclear force reminds us that power isn't about domination, it's about cohesion. It's not about how much you can control, but about how well you can hold together. It's not about the size of your influence, but about the strength of your connections. And it suggests that the most important work you'll ever do will happen in spaces so small, so intimate, so brief, that no one else will ever see them. But those moments, those choices, those tiny acts of holding together when everything else would fall apart, they're not small at all. They're the strongest forces in your personal universe. And like the force that holds atoms together, they don't need to announce themselves. They just need to work quietly, powerfully, in the spaces that matter most. So the next time you feel insignificant, remember that the strongest force in the cosmos works only in the smallest spaces. The next time you think your quiet acts of love or courage don't matter because they're not visible from a distance, remember that distance is the enemy of the most powerful forces. The next time you wonder if your small daily choices to hold yourself and others together make any difference, remember that without forces exactly like those, nothing in the universe would exist. You are held together and you hold others together by forces so strong that they make gravity look weak. They just happen to work in whispers instead of shouts, in touches instead of commands, in the intimate spaces where true power has always lived. Most of the universe's power operates not in the grand spectacle of exploding stars or colliding galaxies, but in the intimate spaces between particles, in the microscopic theatres where the real drama unfolds. We've been taught to look up for meaning, to search the vast cosmos for answers, but the most profound forces that shape everything you know work in spaces so small they make atoms look like solar systems. Consider the strong nuclear force. It's the most powerful force in the known universe, yet it only operates across distances measured in femtometers, spaces so tiny that if a proton were the size of a marble, the strong force would reach about as far as the thickness of a human hair. But within that impossibly small range, it's 100 times stronger than electromagnetism and 100 quintillion times stronger than gravity. This force holds together the very core of every atom, preventing the positively charged protons from flying apart in electromagnetic fury. Without it, matter itself would disintegrate. The universe would be nothing but a soup of isolated particles, incapable of forming anything. No stars, no planets, no life, no thoughts, no love. The profound intimacy of this force reveals something essential about how reality operates. The most crucial work happens not in the expansive theatres we can see, but in the hidden chambers we can barely imagine. Your body, your thoughts, your capacity to experience wonder, all of it depends on forces that work only when things get close enough to touch at the deepest level. It's a reminder that proximity isn't just about physical distance, it's about the fundamental architecture of meaning itself. This pattern repeats throughout the layers of existence. In your brain, the most important communications happen across synaptic gaps measured in nanometers. The difference between a thought and no thought, between memory and forgetting, between recognition and confusion, occurs in spaces 20,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. These gaps are where electrochemical signals leap from one neuron to another, carrying the coded information that becomes your experience of being alive. The synapse is perhaps the most intimate space in the universe, where the physical becomes mental, where chemistry becomes consciousness, where the material world touches something that feels immaterial. Your microbiome operates in this same realm of the microscopically profound. Trillions of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms live in and on your body, collectively weighing about as much as your brain. These invisible residents don't just digest your food, they influence your mood, your immune system, your decision-making, even your personality. The bacteria in your gut produce neurotransmitters that affect your emotional state. They communicate with your brain through the vagus nerve, sending signals that can make you feel anxious or calm, optimistic or depressed. You think your thoughts are yours, but many of them arise from conversations happening between microscopic organisms you've never seen. Your choices are influenced by creatures whose entire civilizations rise and fall in the space of days, all within the intimate ecosystem of your body. DNA works in this same small-scale theatre of enormous consequence. The instructions for building and maintaining your entire body are written in a molecular code so compact that all the information needed to create a human being could fit on the head of a pin. Yet this microscopic library contains the blueprints for your eyes, your heart, your capacity for language, your predisposition towards certain emotions. Every cell in your body carries this complete instruction manual, and the difference between health and disease often comes down to changes measured in single nucleotides. Alterations so small, they involve the substitution of just one molecular letter in a book of 3 billion. Even in physics, the most fundamental interactions happen at scales that defy imagination. Quantum entanglement, where particles become connected in ways that transcend space and time, occurs between objects so small that their size approaches the mathematical concept of zero. Yet this phenomenon, operating in the realm of the nearly non-existent, may be responsible for the coherence of consciousness itself. Some theories suggest that the unity of your subjective experience, the fact that all your scattered thoughts and sensations feel like they belong to a single, continuous self, emerges from quantum entanglements between microtubules in your neurons. The deepest mystery of human existence, consciousness, may arise from forces operating in spaces smaller than viruses. This pattern extends into your emotional and psychological life as well. The most transformative moments often happen in the smallest spaces. The pause between stimulus and response, the gap between heartbeats, when you decide whether to speak or stay silent, the microsecond when eye contact either deepens into recognition or breaks into avoidance. Love often begins not in grand gestures, but in tiny synchronizations. The way someone's breathing matches yours when they're listening closely, the barely perceptible softening around their eyes when they see you, the small adjustments in posture that signal safety or interest. These micro-behaviors, operating below the threshold of conscious awareness, often determine the trajectory of relationships more than any words ever spoken. Trauma, too, works in these intimate spaces. It's not just about what happened, but about how those experiences get encoded in your nervous system at the cellular level. The memory of threat becomes embedded in the microscopic architecture of your neurons, creating hair trigger responses to stimuli that might be completely innocent. Healing often requires working at the same small scale, gradually rewiring neural pathways through tiny, repeated experiences of safety and connection. Therapy doesn't work through grand revelations alone. It works through the accumulation of small moments where the nervous system learns, bit by bit, to respond differently. The same principle governs how habits form and change. You don't transform your life through massive overhauls, but through tiny adjustments in neural firing patterns. Each time you choose a different response, you strengthen certain synaptic connections while letting others weaken. The person you become is sculpted not through dramatic moments of willpower, but through the microscopic accumulation of slightly different choices, each one shifting the probability of future choices by barely measurable amounts. Over time, these invisible adjustments compound into entirely new ways of being. This reveals something profound about the nature of power itself. We're conditioned to look for influence in the obvious places, in wealth, in position, in size, in volume, but the forces that actually shape reality operate in the spaces between spaces, in the gaps where one thing touches another, in the intimate zones where boundaries become permeable. The power that matters isn't the power to dominate from a distance, it's the power to create resonance in close proximity, to influence through presence rather than force, to work in the small spaces where real change becomes possible. Understanding this changes how you might approach your own life. Instead of searching for grand transformations or dramatic breakthroughs, you begin to pay attention to the small spaces, the quality of your attention in conversations, the tiny shifts in posture that either open or close your heart, the microscopic choices that either reinforce old patterns or create new possibilities. You start to see that the most profound work happens not in the spotlight of conscious intention, but in the intimate theatres of habit, relationship, and cellular memory. This is why proximity matters so much in human relationships. Love, trust, and healing all require getting close enough for the subtle forces to work. You can't create deep connection from a distance because the forces that bind people together, mirror neurons, pheromones, synchronized heartbeats, shared breathing patterns, all operate in the realm of the intimate and immediate. The strong nuclear force of human connection only works when people are willing to enter each other's personal space, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. The implications ripple outward into how you think about meaning and purpose. If the universe's most powerful forces work in the smallest spaces, then perhaps the most meaningful life is not the most visible one, but the most intimate one. Perhaps significance isn't measured by reach or recognition, but by depth and closeness. Perhaps the work that matters most happens in the quiet spaces between people, in the small acts of attention and care that create the conditions for flourishing, in the microscopic choices that either support or undermine the delicate systems that hold life together. This understanding invites a different kind of humility and a different kind of hope. Humility because it reminds you that you're not separate from these forces. You are these forces, a temporary organization of particles held together by the same intimate powers that bind atomic nuclei. Hope because it suggests that you don't need to be large or loud or famous to matter profoundly. You need to be present, attentive, and willing to work in the small spaces where real change happens. The universe, it turns out, is not a machine of distant gears and impersonal forces. It's an intimate system where the most powerful interactions happen in the closest quarters, where the forces that hold everything together only work when things are willing to get near enough to touch at the deepest level. And in that intimacy, in those small spaces where the strong force operates, you find not just the secret of atomic stability, but the secret of everything that makes life possible, meaningful, and worth living. The deepest forces work in the smallest spaces, and you, in your willingness to enter those spaces with others, become part of that fundamental force yourself. We exist at the intersection of perception and presence, where awareness becomes the invisible architect of experience. In the smallest spaces between thoughts, between heartbeats, between the moment light touches our eyes and meaning blooms in our minds, reality assembles itself through the delicate machinery of attention. Consider the observer effect, that fundamental truth of quantum mechanics, where particles exist in superposition until the moment they are measured. This isn't merely a scientific curiosity, it's a mirror reflecting something profound about the nature of awareness itself. When we observe, we don't simply witness, we participate in the collapse of infinite possibilities into singular experience. Your consciousness operates like a quantum field, constantly collapsing waves of potential into the particles of perception. Every glance, every focused thought, every moment of deliberate attention acts as a measurement that crystallizes one reality from the foam of all possible realities. You are not separate from what you observe. You are the instrument through which observation occurs. The strongest force in the universe, the strong nuclear force, works only at the smallest scales, binding protons and neutrons together in the heart of atoms. It doesn't reach across galaxies or even across molecules. Its power lies entirely in proximity, in the intimate spaces where particles touch. This reveals something essential about how meaning operates in human experience. The most transformative forces in our lives aren't the grand gestures or distant influences, but the quiet interactions that happen in close proximity. The conversation that shifts perspective, the moment of eye contact that creates understanding, the small daily choices that accumulate into character. Just as atoms hold together through forces that work only when particles are close enough to touch, consciousness binds itself to reality through attention focused intimately on the present moment. The closer we draw our awareness to the immediate texture of experience, the stronger the connection becomes. Every moment of perception is a reconstruction, not a recording. Your brain doesn't passively receive reality. It actively builds it from fragments of sensory data, filling gaps with prediction, colouring experiences with memory, editing the stream of consciousness before it reaches awareness. This means you've never actually seen the world directly. What you experience is your nervous system's best interpretation of electrical signals, a user interface designed not for truth, but for survival. The red you see exists only in your mind. The sound you hear is your brain's translation of air pressure variations. Even your sense of now is slightly delayed, a beautifully edited playback of what has already happened. Yet this reconstruction isn't a flaw, it's a feature. It allows consciousness to be creative, adaptive, responsive. Your perception isn't trapped by what is. It's free to interpret, to find patterns, to create meaning from chaos. Consciousness has a peculiar property. It can observe itself. This creates feedback loops where awareness turns inward, watching its own processes, creating recursive spirals of self-reflection. You think a thought, then think about thinking that thought, then become aware of your awareness of your thinking. This recursive quality is both consciousness's greatest power and its deepest trap. Self-observation changes what it observes. The moment you try to examine your own mind objectively, you alter the very thing you're trying to understand. You remain forever unknowable to yourself, not because of limitation, but because of the dynamic nature of awareness itself. Your consciousness doesn't exist in isolation, it's part of an ecosystem. Mirror neurons fires when you observe others' actions, creating invisible threads of connection. Emotional states spread through social networks like contagions. Even something as simple as seeing someone yawn can shift your brain state, revealing how permeable the boundaries of self really are. This interconnectedness suggests that individual consciousness is part of a larger field of awareness, a shared space where minds influence each other through subtle resonances. Your focused attention doesn't just shape your own reality, it ripples outward, affecting the quality of consciousness in everyone around you. Perhaps the most profound truth about consciousness is that it remains fundamentally mysterious. Science can map neural networks, track chemical processes, even predict some decisions before we're aware of making them. But the hard problem persists. Why does subjective experience exist at all? Why is there something it feels like to be you? This mystery isn't a problem to be solved, but a space to be inhabited. Living consciously means embracing the paradox of being the thing that seeks to understand itself, of being simultaneously the observer and the observed, the question and the questioner. In this strange cosmos where most matter is invisible, where time is relative, where particles can be entangled across galaxies, consciousness stands as perhaps the most extraordinary phenomenon of all. Not because it's separate from the physical world, but because it's the universe's way of experiencing itself subjectively. Your awareness, fragile and flickering as it may seem, is the lens through which cosmos becomes conscious. Every moment of focused attention is an act of cosmic significance, reality collapsing from potential into presence, from possibility into experience. The practice of consciousness, then, isn't about controlling or perfecting your mental states. It's about recognizing that awareness itself is the most intimate force in your universe, working only in the closest proximity between you and this moment, between attention and experience, between the observer you are and the reality you're continuously creating through the simple, profound act of paying attention. In the end, consciousness isn't something you have, it's something you are. And in that being, in that flickering moment of awareness, reading these words right now, the universe touches itself and knows that it exists. And so we return to where we began, standing at the edge of everything you thought you knew. These aren't just abstract concepts or distant theories. They are the hidden mechanics of your daily existence, the invisible architecture that shapes every breath, every thought, every moment of awareness. From the simulation humming beneath your feet to the dark matter holding galaxies together, from the malleable nature of your memories to the quantum dance of particles responding to your gaze, reality has revealed itself to be far stranger, far more fluid, and far more participatory than we ever dared imagine. You are not a passive observer in a fixed universe. You are a co-creator in a reality that bends, shifts, and responds to consciousness itself. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all, that in a cosmos built from mostly nothing, held together by invisible forces, and potentially running on cosmic code, your awareness, your choices, and your very existence matter more than you ever thought possible. So the next time you feel small or insignificant, remember, you are made of the rarest stuff in the universe. You are the cosmos looking back at itself, and every moment you're awake, you are participating in the most extraordinary experiment ever conducted. The universe trying to understand itself through you. The voice in your head that doubts, that questions, that wonders. It may not be entirely yours, but it's asking the right questions. Your memories may rewrite themselves with each recall, but they're still weaving the story of a consciousness that refuses to be contained by the limits of matter and time. Your perception may lag behind reality. Your choices may emerge from neural predictions. Your body may be mostly empty space, but somehow, impossibly, beautifully, you still feel, you still love, you still hope, you still dream. And in a universe where particles tunnel through impossible barriers, where time bends around mass, where observation creates reality, where your gut bacteria influence your decisions, and where infinite versions of you might exist across parallel worlds, the greatest mystery isn't any of these strange truths we've uncovered. The greatest mystery is that despite learning all of this, despite having the comfortable illusions stripped away, despite discovering that certainty is impossible and that you're floating through space on a rock in a cosmos that might be nothing more than an accident, you're still here. You're still curious. You're still capable of awe. That persistence, that stubborn refusal to collapse under the weight of cosmic uncertainty might be the most human thing of all. So embrace the strangeness, dance with the paradoxes, marvel at the impossibility of your own existence. Because in a universe built from quantum foam and dark energy, held together by forces we can't see, evolving through processes we barely understand. You are not just an observer of miracles, you are one. Thanks for joining me in the space between the known and unknowable. Keep questioning everything, because the questions you ask help determine what reality becomes.